name's Patrick Mangan, and I'm sitting in as the guest host today for Faith of Our Fathers, and we want to welcome you to the program today. Today with me, I have a dear old friend and a close friend of your normal host, Peter Hellens, who was called away on urgent business and who will be back with us in a few weeks. We have Gus Zulke with us today. Now, Gus is the Director of Faith Formation at St. Bavo's Catholic Church in Mishawaka, Indiana. And Gus, I'm happy to say we've been doing this kind of thing for 27 years now.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem possible.
No,
although I noticed that your part's a little wider and my belt's a little wider. So we've gone through quite a few years together. We're seeing rings on the tree here.
Yeah. Both of us having graduated from Notre Dame in 1980. And we knew each other quite well back in those days, even though you were on the South Quad and I was on the North Quad. But Christ was our common denominator despite our geographical differences.
That's right. It was good. It was good that I'm not sure how Notre Dame tolerated both of us at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's why we had to be on separate quads. But it was a great time back then. Spending time together in Father Ed O'Connor's prayer group at Notre Dame. Many hundreds, perhaps thousands of students really through the years who had a chance to be a part of that. And out of our time together, a great friendship all these years. So welcome.
Thanks.
And it's great to be with you today.
Thanks for coming onto the show.
This is exciting. You've got a great opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the scripture says that diligent hands will serve before kings. And you've been diligent and faithful in your labors here in Mishawaka at St. Bavo's. And now you have a special invitation to come and speak to, and not just speak to, but teach of a nation. You're going to get a chance to speak to the leaders of the nation. That nation is Uganda. Tell me, how did that come about?
Well,
how did the religious ed director, how did the pastoral assistant at St. Bavo's end up speaking to the parliamentarians of Uganda?
Yeah, it still surprises me when I think about this. I mean, obviously. I've been working at St. Bavo's, serving the parish there for 13 years. I've served Father Jim Schaefer there, and now I serve Father England there. And I'm really looking forward to getting into Uganda. How this happened is that I went to... I've been working at St. Bavo's, and there was a priest, Father Binta, who was working at St. Bavo's, visiting St. Bavo's from Uganda. And it turns out that he would use my computer down in the office where I work, and he would use the computer to access news from Uganda and so on. And during one of those times, he was getting very bad news from Uganda. This was last year. And the news was that a woman with a child, a little baby, was shot and killed outside the refugee camp by radical Islamists. And these radical Islamic people had been kidnapping people also, taking them into the Sudan, which is north of Uganda. So in the north of Uganda, they got a lot of problems with both rebels and radical Islamic people from the Sudan. And as most people know, there's been a huge civil war going on in the Sudan for the last 17 or 18 years. Right. And the Muslims from the north have been bitterly attacking and practicing genocide against the Christians who are poorer in the south of the Sudan. But the south of the Sudan touches the north of Uganda, and so that conflict bleeds through the border.
So this is really, you're really going to be at one of the flash points in the globe where the active persecution of the churches. In fact, many of the believers in Uganda are actually being martyred. So you're going to be speaking to the parliament that really is responsible for the peace and safety of the nation.
Right. This is a big problem they have in the north of their country, and they haven't figured out quite what to do. The difficulty of the rebel forces that they have caused the national forces is this. When you kidnap a bunch of people and conscript them into an army, then the army is made up of 80% kidnapped people. And how do you fight an army like that? So if it were a normal situation, they could probably ask for outside help. But this is like what you'd be doing is shooting at your own people, your own family members who have been conscripted into the rebel army. It puts the government into a catch-22 situation.
Now, would this army that's been created by the conscripts or slaves that have been brought in, the people who've been enslaved and then put at the front line of battle, are they able to desert, or are they able to somehow leave and get back?
In some cases, they get to leave. If they get caught leaving, of course, they're shot and killed. So, for example, there's a seminary, Sacred Heart Seminary in the north of Uganda, where they had 40-some seminarians, 41 seminarians, something like that, and they were all kidnapped. The rector of the seminary had gone down, this is ironic, the rector of the seminary had gone down to Kampala, the capital city, to plan for the Martyrs' Day celebration. Now, here we have the 4th of July. In Uganda, the big public celebration is Martyrs' Day. Can you imagine that? In June, they celebrate Martyrs' Day. And in fact, the martyrs are all different Christians. It's not, in fact, I think the largest number of Ugandan martyrs that are celebrated on Martyrs' Day are Anglican martyrs. But they have Roman Catholic martyrs, evangelical martyrs. I mean, martyrdom knows no boundaries like that.
Yes, and many of our viewers, I'm sure, are going to remember Uganda from the violence of the former dictator Idi Amin and the terrible, brutal nation that he ran so many years ago.
Right.
In fact, he recently died, and so there was a little bit of a resurgence of remembrance about what he was and what he did. And so now you're going into a country that is living the life and death of the gospel, living the life and death of Christ on a regular basis. Now, somebody might ask, what does a Christian believer, what does a Christian minister from Mishawaka, Indiana, have to say and teach about that? And what are you going to say and teach about that?
See, that's a question that ran through my head when I was offered this possibility of doing this by Father Binta. The point is that Father Binta was looking at that computer screen that morning, and he was weeping. And I came down to my office, as is my custom, and there he was using my computer. And I saw the look on his face. I saw that it was drained of, just drained with sorrow and grief. And I said, what's up? And he pointed to the screen, and I looked at the screen, and I heard about this woman at this refugee camp, and all I could do was say, Father, let's pray. And so together, he and I prayed for his country. And I prayed, and I said, Lord, I know the people in Uganda are suffering greatly, but where you suffer, Lord, the Spirit of God, the Spirit of your glory can come. And I prayed for the Spirit of glory upon his country with him that day. And it was a very moving moment for me. And he thanked me for the prayer. But you're right. What in the world does I've lived a very comfortable life all my life. Right? I went to Notre Dame, and I've I've worked for the Catholic Church for most of the time since I've been out of school at Notre Dame, and
You have a wonderful wife and family?
I do. I have 3 wonderful children that we adopted, and our oldest son is through the pro-life movement in South Bend, and the other 2 children are from Russia. In fact, just yesterday I had the privilege of being at a prayer meeting, and the leader of the prayer meeting was holding out a microphone, like asking if people had anything to thank God for. And my son was just wanting to do this. And so he announced his name. He says, "I'm Dima Zilke, and I want to thank God that my father adopted me." And my jaw just sort of dropped, because I didn't know what he was going to say.
Wow.
But he's from Russia, and he was adopted when he was 2.5 years old. And the point is that to go to a third world country, what do I have to say? I mean, that's a good question.
Well, let's bring it completely into focus.
Okay.
Because to whom much is given, much shall be required. So really, your exposure to the kingdom, your exposure to the gospel, your exposure to higher education has already led you to be a missionary in your own home, having adopted your son from another country. And so you're living that out day to day. But what does your Christian life, your Catholic Christian life here, what does it have to witness to these parliamentarians?
Wow.
What are you going to witness to them? What are you going to speak to them?
Well, I've been, of course, reflecting on that quite a bit, because I have to give a retreat. Mm-hmm. I'm giving a retreat to the parliamentarians. Why don't we? Tell
us a little bit more about the retreat. What's the plan of the retreat?
The plan of the retreat, it's an Advent retreat. In the Catholic Church, we have the season of Advent, which starts the liturgical year. And the season of Advent is dominated, of course, by 2 people. Mary, the Mother of God, and St. John the Baptist. Mm. And I've chosen St. John the Baptist as the dominant theme of the retreat. St. John the Baptist is also interesting because besides leading up the liturgical calendar of the Catholic Church by showing up at Advent, preparing the way for the coming of Jesus, he's also at the head of the Roman martyrology. In other words, he's the first martyr mentioned in the prayers of the Church that honor the martyrs. So the first Eucharistic prayer is John the Baptist, Stephen, Matthias, and all the other saints.
You bring up a great point, and for many of our friends and viewers who may be listening, who are not part of the Catholic tradition, exploring that for just a moment, that the 2 central figures are Mary and John. Just tell us a little bit, why are they the central figures in Advent, the time of anticipating Christ's birth?
Well, the reason they are is that in order to open our hearts to the coming of Christ, we look to Mary because of her faithful response. She said yes.
Yes.
She said, "Fiat, be it done unto me according to your word." And her yes to the Lord made it possible for Jesus to physically come into the world. Okay, so that's Mary's side of it. John the Baptist, of course, is the precursor. He had the job of clearing the way, of preparing the way, making straight the way of the Lord. And so you have those 2 figures at the head of Advent in order to open people up so that they can receive Jesus more fully.
It seems interesting that at this point in history, that these 2 figures have so much to speak, not only to our Christian brothers in Uganda, Christian brothers and sisters in Uganda, but also here. Mary's yes seems to be an incredible contrast to so many times when people in the Western world are saying no to children. We've been struggling through really the difficult issue and the tragic issue of abortion in our country. So Mary's yes speaks strongly to the church. And John the Baptist, he said he had to clear the way. He sure had a lot to clear, didn't he? What were some of the things that he was confronting when he had to clear the way?
Well, think of the fact that John the Baptist had to, he confronted Herod and Herod's marriage, which was out of order, against the wisdom of the time. He had to confront the Pharisees, who were messing up the relation of law to love, and who represented the formalistic religious party, rule-bound and missing the heart of the gospel. He had to confront the people, and you see in the Gospel of Luke him confronting the people, calling them to justice. So anyone with 2 tunics should give one to the person who has none. He's calling people to re-examine their relationships in light of their duty to prepare the way for the coming of the one that he was not even worthy to untie the strap of his sandal, right? But he prepares the way, and then he's the first person to hear when Jesus comes the vocation of Jesus. You are my beloved Son.
It's interesting that many might have been thinking of Stephen as the first martyr.
Right.
And forgetting that before all the lights were turned on, after the resurrection and after the cross, that John the Baptist, whom